Hi guys, and welcome to Unit 5, Day 3. Today we're going to be talking about how do body systems work together to maintain homeostasis. And as we discussed in class today for me, yesterday for you, all of our body systems work together in order to maintain a relatively stable internal environment or homeostasis, right? And it's very important that our body be able to maintain homeostasis because that's how we stay alive. We need stability for the health of all of our cells and organs. And the way that that happens is by the collaboration of all our body systems. But we're going to start by discussing the cooperation and interaction between the circulatory system and the respiratory system, which we've already hinted at talking about gas exchange. So, question number 1 here. Let's get started with the do now. Which statement best describes arteries? So we remember that arteries transport blood away from the heart, away, so we can eliminate B and D, and they have thick walls, and they have thick walls because they need to be strong and muscular to pump blood, oxygenated blood at a high pressure away from the heart to be supplied to all of our organs and cells. All right. So speaking of blood vessels, let's do a little reading about some blood vessels now. So the circulatory system accomplishes the vital task of transport of blood, circulation, transport, synonyms, through the many thousands of kilometers of blood vessels in the body. Blood from the lungs enters the left atrium of the heart and then passes to the left ventricle. This oxygenated blood then begins its journey throughout the body by passing through the aorta of the heart, the body's largest artery, to the other arteries. So, blood from the lung enters the left atrium of the heart and passes to the left ventricle. This oxygenated blood that comes through the pulmonary vein into the heart travels, is pumped out by the aorta, which is super artery. Looks a little bit like this, and it has kind of 3 spouts coming out of it, and those spouts are sending the oxygenated blood to all the different places that it needs to go within our body. The arteries are vessels that have thick muscular walls. They are very elastic, expanding and contracting because they're muscular, as blood from the heart is pumped through them in pulses. And that's what your pulse that you might measure like this or like this is. That is the expansion and contraction of your arteries as they pump the blood. 1 pulse for every heartbeat. The elasticity of your arteries' walls exerts pressure against the blood inside. This pressure that's exerted through your artery is measured as your blood pressure. And that blood pressure, again, you may have heard of blood pressure and think about it as like a bad thing, but that's high blood pressure or low blood pressure. Our body needs to maintain homeostasis, which means a nice, stable, moderate 120/80 is the number, but that's not important really for our purposes. What you want to focus on is our body needs to maintain appropriate and stable blood pressure. And one of the ways that we do that is through the action of our arteries. All right. Now, here is the most fun part. So this diagram, we're looking at veins. Venules are little tiny veins. Arteries, arterioles, little tiny arteries. And these venules, and let me do that blue, these venules and these arterioles are very small, and they branch off from the larger blood vessels, and they reach this point called the capillary bed. And this is a sort of like netted area, and this deoxygenated blood is able to mix with the oxygenated blood in a web-like fashion. Maybe think of Spider-Man. And this web-like fashion, just like Spider-Man's web always saves the day, your capillaries are saving the day by allowing you to breathe because of a process called gas exchange. And whenever you see the word capillaries, the next thought that you should have is gas exchange, because the capillaries facilitate diffusion of all sorts of materials, but their primary function is this action of gas exchange, the exchanging of oxygen, the gas that is needed for our cells to undergo aerobic respiration or cellular respiration, and carbon dioxide, the waste byproduct that needs to be exhaled out of our bodies, that is produced by that same process, right? Our capillaries enable us to both bring in appropriate gases and nutrients and also release our waste. And because the arteries and veins need to maintain this segregation of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, it has to be separate. The capillary beds provide a place where the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood can mix, and oxygen and carbon dioxide can be exchanged for one another. Pretty cool stuff. Thanks, capillaries. Eventually, the blood from the arteries enters the capillaries, the smallest of vessels within the circulatory system. Capillaries are close to every body cell because they are so small and there's so many of them. It is at the capillaries that the exchange of nutrients, gases between the blood and cells takes place. And that is also the other key point here, right? Not only is this exchange between the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood carried in the different blood vessels happening, but the critical part is the exchange between the blood vessels, the capillaries, and our tissues that need the oxygen and nutrients to go in and the waste to go out. And one of the primary tissues that we discuss in conjunction with gas exchange are the alveoli, which are like little berries in your lungs that are the site of gas exchange in the lungs. After moving through the capillaries, blood returns through the thin-walled veins, which get larger and larger closer to the heart. Unlike the walls of the arteries, the walls of the veins have little elasticity and are under low blood pressure. To prevent the blood from moving backward, one-way valves work to ensure the deoxygenated blood travels back towards the heart. So veins have valves and they carry deoxygenated blood back to the heart under low pressure. And remember, veins kind of look like a paper straw after you've been drinking out of it for too long. They are thin and they do not have to maintain a high blood pressure because they are just carrying the blood back up to your heart. And the reason they have valves, the valves are like little doors within the veins so that once the blood has made it past that gap, it can't backflow, it can't go backwards. And those valves are really critical. If you have a malfunction in one of those valves, it can cause blood to pool or collect in places where it shouldn't be pooling, especially places like your feet, where gravity can hold the blood if the valves and the veins are not functioning correctly. So as I said in the day one video, sometimes people have that issue and they wear very tight socks called compression socks that literally help press and compress your veins such that they are a little bit more open, and it allows the valves to be tighter sealed and the backflow of blood to stop if that's a problem that you have. But if you're nice and healthy and keep your circulatory system healthy by doing cardio and eating a healthy diet, you hopefully shouldn't have those problems. So now let's rank the blood vessels from largest to smallest. We've got our big old arteries, thick muscular arteries. We've got our veins, thin with valves. And we've got the smallest of all, our capillaries, which are porous to facilitate or help the process of diffusion in occurring, right? So they're little tiny vessels. And there are capillaries, veins, and arteries of different sizes, right? Depending on where they are in our bodies. But in general, all your arteries are on average larger than the average of all of your veins, and your capillaries are much, much, much smaller. Identify the major structures of the circulatory system. We've got the heart and blood vessels. And that's it. So we've got your heart and then your arteries, veins, and capillaries. And that's the whole circulatory system. But she is critical. Even though it's just the heart and blood vessels, we would be fully dead without our circulatory system. And the interesting thing that I hope you're realizing about this unit is that if any of our body systems malfunctioned, it would cause issues in the whole rest of the organism. Hence, how do our body systems work together to maintain homeostasis? Without the cooperation and coordination of all of our body systems, the whole organism would not be able to function, the whole organism being us. All right, nutrients and gases are exchanged between the cells and blood across the capillaries. How does the blood pressure in the arteries compare to the blood pressure in the veins? Pressure is higher in arteries. And that's because your arteries are carrying the blood away from your heart and pumping the blood away from your heart. And in order to get that blood from this one muscle that's pumping it out, to get to the entire rest of your body, your arteries need to be able to maintain a high blood pressure. And the way they do that is by being muscular themselves and expanding and contracting, and also having those thick muscular walls that can maintain their structure even under the high pressure of the blood immediately exiting the heart. Why can you feel a pulse in your wrist every time your heart beats? Expansion and contraction of arteries in the wrist. And there are arteries obviously here in your throat and your thumb, anywhere else where you can feel a pulse. That is what you're feeling. You're feeling the expansion and contraction of the arteries. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is all I have for you today. This has been the circulatory system, day 3. Today's aim was, how do body systems work together to maintain a relatively stable internal environment? And please don't forget to go ahead and complete your exit ticket, and I'll see you all tomorrow on Zoom. Bye, guys.